All right, we are live. Okay, so I have touched on the topic of alcohol a few times in my videos here on YouTube, and I guess people aren't too interested in sitting down and listening to an hour video, so I'm going to debunk these little short 4 or 5 minute videos that Tyler Baker has been putting out. So this one right here is called "Wine Was Still Found in a Grape," and obviously I've known this argument, Isaiah 65:8. So let's just listen to what he says, and then look at what he's saying. So, of course, a teetotaler's position is that wine in the Bible sometimes means wine or it sometimes means juice, but that you can't ever look at wine and always know 100% certain that it is always the same thing. This is how an Orthodox, a Catholic level Trinitarian would look at the word God or the word Lord, and they would say, well, it's Jesus here or it's the Father here, when the Bible's clear that there's only one Lord. And the Baptists also do this when it comes to the word elder. They say, see, well, elder here means age, but here it just means spiritual age. Well, no, it means elder all the time. It means physical age. Wine always means alcohol. And I'm going to prove that clear as day. Just wanted to show you their position. So basically, I mean, that's the gist of what he believes. So they look at Isaiah 65:8 and they say, see, it says, as the new wine is found in the cluster, and clearly the cluster is the cluster of grapes. So how can it be already alcohol if it's still inside of the grape? That doesn't make sense. Therefore, wine does mean juice here in this passage. That is their ultimate conclusion. Now, in the rest of this video, he did not mention the fact that it says new wine because of the fact that that's easily debunked. And that's what they used to do. They used to say, well, see, and some of them still do it. They say, see, it says new wine because new wine is juice, and, regular wine, more often than not is alcohol. Well, no, new wine is alcohol. Acts chapter 2, the day of Pentecost, it says, Cretes and Arabians, we do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of God. And they were all amazed and were in doubt, saying one to another, what meaneth this? Others mocking said, these men are full of new wine. Number one, the key characteristic of being drunk in the Bible is being filled with wine. This whole fallacious argument of, well, what if they take 2 or 3 shots of liquor, they're not filled, but they're drunk. Okay, liquor isn't wine, is it? So the verses that are talking about drunkenness as it pertains to wine are always in reference to being filled with it. And I don't think that it was 10 to 13% alcohol at that time. I think it was probably, closer to anywhere between 4 and 7. But anyway, others mocking said, these men are full of new wine. But Peter in the next verse stood up, and then in verse 15 it says, these are not drunken as ye suppose, seeing it is but the 3rd hour of the day. See, being full of new wine is going to cause you to be drunk because new wine is alcohol. So it says in verse 8 of Isaiah 65, thus saith the Lord, as the new wine is found in the cluster, and one saith, destroy it not, for a blessing is in it, so will I do for my servant's sake, that I may not destroy them all. Now, I'm going to finish the rest of his video, and then I'm going to point out the ridiculousness of his statements and his arguments. Well, then I guess it's alcohol, because the Bible clearly defines new wine in Acts chapter 2 as being alcoholic. You can't be filled with new wine and be drunken and then say, well, new wine is not alcohol. I mean, they're putting an adjective before a noun. Okay. Not only is it wine, but it's new wine. So you're telling me that in Acts 2, the new wine there is alcoholic, but the new wine in Isaiah 65 is not alcoholic? Well, it can't be alcoholic because it's in the cluster. Actually, that's not what's being defined as wine. But again, I'll get to that in a second. He said that's the literal interpretation. Then keep that in mind. That is a fallacious argument, and that shows a complete misunderstanding of God's word. Number one, context. Okay. And you don't really need even context. You can just look at that verse by itself. But let's look at the verse before and the verse after to understand the actual statement that's being made. Because if you look at it, in a literal, like just a pure literal sense, you would still not come to the conclusion that Tyler Baker is coming to, but that's what he's claiming. It says in verse 7, your iniquities and the iniquities of your fathers together, saith the Lord, which have burned incense upon the mountains and blasphemed me upon the hills. Therefore will I measure their former work into their bosom. Now, he is talking prophetically about the coming judgment that he was going to do through Babylon. Now, Babylon had not even come to power yet, but Isaiah prophesied about this throughout his ministry. I mean, back in Isaiah 21, Isaiah 13, etc. Next verse says, thus saith the Lord, as the new wine is found in the cluster. So in the same way that, the new wine is found in the cluster, and one saith, destroy it not. This is the key to the verse. For a blessing is in it. So will I do this in the same way, so will I do for my servant's sake, that I may not destroy them all. Okay. What is the blessing that is in that cluster? It is wine. Okay. And when I say wine, I mean wine, alcohol. That is the blessing that is in it. Now, is the wine literally in it? No, it's not, but it is what is to come forth. Now, do not write me off. Actually, listen to my argument. Okay. It says, as the new wine, and even Tyler Baker admits that that is a comparison. He says it's being compared to something that's spiritual. It's a spiritual comparison. No, it's not, actually. Now, of course, it's a spiritual. It's God talking. Of course, God is a spirit. Of course, it's a spiritual whatever. But both comparisons are both carnal events. So I don't know what he's talking about when he says that it's spiritual. He's trying to disregard my interpretation of this verse. It says, so will I do for my servants' sakes, that I may not destroy them all. So he is comparing a cluster of grapes to the nation of Israel. And he's saying, in the same way that there is new wine, that blessing that is to come forth out of that cluster of grapes, Jesus Christ, the Messiah, is the blessing that is in my nation. That is the reason why I will not destroy it. And it says in the next verse, and I will bring forth a seed out of Jacob, and out of Judah an inheritor of my mountains. And mine elect shall inherit it, and my servant shall dwell there. So this is God bringing forth a seed out of Jacob, the same way that you would take the juice and the pulp of the grapes and the cluster, and you would pull that blessing from it, and you would get wine from that blessing. Okay, was that seed already there? No, Jesus had not been born yet. Okay, but what is God saying? He is not going to destroy that nation because Christ is yet to come. And God is, of course, bound by the promise that he made to Abraham. The same way that God's not going to trash his nation is the same way you wouldn't destroy a cluster of grapes because there's a blessing in it. You're going to eventually, that's going to become wine. The same way that the nation of Israel is, one day going to bring forth the Messiah. That is what that's saying. Okay. So it is a reference to alcohol, but it is not saying that within the cluster of grapes is actual alcohol at that time. It's saying that the blessing in the grapes is the fact that it's going to become new wine. The same way, again, it's compared to Christ coming forth out of the nation of Israel. So if you're going to sit here and say, well, the new wine is still in the cluster, it's clearly there in the cluster, okay, then you have to admit that the incarnation of Jesus Christ happened at the time of Isaiah, which didn't happen. So will I do for my servants' sakes. Okay. I mean, it's pretty clear. I don't know any other way to say or, show it. So that is that. New wine is alcohol, as proven by Acts chapter 2. And the statement, the actual statement, if you want to read it literally, Tyler Baker, let's read it literally. What is it literally saying? It's saying that you will not destroy grapes because it's going to become wine, the same way God's not going to destroy Israel because it's going to become, the nation that brings forth Jesus Christ. That is what it is talking about. That is not proof for teetotalism. New wine is alcohol. Wine is alcohol every time, without exception. And this is just a fact. And I did not do this in another video. I did it on Facebook, but he also brought up Isaiah chapter 16, verse 10, which is another misunderstanding that he has, because he looks at everything as though it's black and white and not, he doesn't understand the allegorical symbolism. It says, and gladness is taken away, and joy out of the plentiful field, and in the vineyards there shall be no singing, neither shall there be shouting. The treaders shall tread out no wine in their presses. I have made their vintage shouting to cease. So he says, see, it says that they're treading out no wine in their presses. So it's clearly defining the juice that's coming forth right there as wine. Well, number one, what is a vineyard? Okay. Now, of course, besides the plants, you have bottling, you have fermentation. I mean, you have everything there to make wine. And in the end of the verse, it says, I have made their vintage shouting to cease. That vintage is not a reference to juice. That is a reference to wine. And you'd have to be an idiot to actually look at that where it says their vintage shouting and say, God's taken away their juice, so they're really mad. What are they, a bunch of toddlers? It's ridiculous. The word vintage is a reference to alcohol. And again, this is kind of like, we talk like this today. Okay, they're not actually treading out, wine. They're treading out something that's going to become wine. Why are they even doing that process to begin with? Because the end desired goal is to obtain wine. So you would say, I'm treading out wine. The same way you would say like something in reference to like buttering bread or like buttering toast. Oh, what are you doing? Yeah, I'm making toast, but I don't see any toast. All you have is bread. Oh, well, yeah, but that's what I'm doing. So, they're treading out wine. They're making wine. Do they have the wine yet? No, but they are going to, right? And many people talk like this. You don't have to be some scholar of the Bible or anything to just know that, human beings speak like this. So that's another really ridiculous understanding of Scripture. And I'm not going to comment on Proverbs 23, Ephesians 5:18, or any of those other verses. I have other videos on alcohol. So go to my channel and search up alcohol if you want those. I'm not trying to make this a long one. I'm going to come out with another video because he just did as well, and I will debunk that shortly.